Story 1. I would rather see a party formed that starts working from the ground up, getting people elected to state offices, developing a program, and showing they can pass it and achieve good results. Then, they can move on to the national stage by winning seats in Congress. I think it is exactly the wrong approach for a third-party candidate to start at the top by running for president without a strong party in Congress behind them. Otherwise, they will have a hard time getting things done. Nearly all third-party candidates' runs for the presidency have been either vanity projects or focused on a single issue. Story 2. I am not emotionally tied to a political party. I am tied to policy, philosophy, and goals. If a third political party rose to a point where they could actually compete and had goals and policies I agree with, I would immediately support them instead of the party I currently support. Our current options are a party I disagree with on nearly every policy and philosophical point, and a party whose policies I largely support but has proven incapable of advocating for itself and successfully communicating policy wins to an electorate influenced by showmanship and misinformation from the opposition. Story 3. I would vote for a third-party candidate if they could demonstrate the ability to get policies passed. This requires having allies in the Senate, House of Representatives, and state governments with proven track records. Anyone running for president without this is not a serious candidate and is merely seeking attention or attempting deception. Story 4. I submit that breaking the two-party duopoly is required if we want our democracy to persist. Push for ranked choice voting if you agree. Story 5. Third party, fourth party, even a fifth party. One of the major issues of our current system is the amount of money the two parties use to keep everything else down and divide us all. Story 6. For national elections. No, not until we have ranked choice voting or a similar system. Until then, it is a waste. Story 7. Technically, yes. But ideally, there would not be any political parties. They lead to laziness all around. Get rid of political parties and require candidates to campaign based on their platforms and records. Force voters to pay attention to what the candidates stand for and want to do, rather than just assuming the letter next to the candidate's name is a valid indication of those things. Story 8. I would like to see a qualified, competent, and capable person who will work for the United States population. Party affiliation is not necessary. Qualifications and competence are needed. Story 9. A presidential system with all executive power in the hands of whoever gets the plurality of votes will not sustainably have more than two parties. Parliamentary systems where parties choose the executive can have as many parties as you like. However, once you have a system where the plurality of votes wins the executive, you will not have more than two parties over time. There can be shock moments when one party is absorbed by a different party, but that will not last long term. When so much power is concentrated in one vote, efficient voter behavior is to form the largest coalition possible that represents most of what they want, with the most important factor being the largest possible coalition. If a voter focuses too hard on exactly what they want, the other side will win. Structurally, in the United States presidential system, no third party can have a chance of winning. Story 10. If a third-party candidate actually had a chance of winning, would you be willing to vote third party, and which one? Obviously, yes. The major presumption is not just that a third party actually has a chance of winning, but also that your preferred third party is the one with the chance of winning. So, for a moment, let's consider what the average American, according to statistical studies, would prefer. All the political quadrant studies show that the largest cluster of Americans fall into the quadrant that is, broadly speaking, economically controlled and more socially traditional. There is still a lot of variation within this quadrant, but this is generally the case. The Democratic and Republican parties, broadly speaking, typically represent the economically controlled / socially progressive and economically free / socially traditional quadrants. The Libertarian Party and broader movement occupy the economically free / socially progressive quadrant. Despite having the most publicly visible third party, this quadrant comprises the smallest group of occupants. What we see is a large demand, whether you like it or not, for what analysts generally call a communitarian-type party. Of the many third parties currently existing, none occupy this niche. Some may try to claim it, such as the American Solidarity Party, but there is no true analog for this group. Why is that? Simply put, The psychological traits of this demographic generally do not lend themselves to desiring to spend time or life participating in hard-hitting politics or pursuing a career that would get them into influential circles in powerful non-governmental organizations, the corporate sphere, or higher government. A lot of these communitarian types can be found in government at the town, township, and county levels, but almost never above that, which unfortunately means they continue to be unrepresented in political life. In my observations, the average Reddit user would not fall within this communitarian block. Whether they acknowledge it or not, the average Reddit user is either a jaded Democrat, a jaded ex-Democrat, or too young to have been around when joining the Democratic Party was considered cool but still jaded. Story 11. Third-party candidates split the vote of one of the two major parties. Viable outsiders can run in the primary of a major party to have their platform accepted. Of course, I could vote for a viable third-party candidate, but it depends on the political environment. Ross Perot was viable but drew votes from the Republican Party base, which contributed to Bill Clinton being elected. Story 12. If there was a progressive candidate like Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I would vote for them. I voted for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. The orange one was never a consideration. Story 13. Serving the country in Washington, D.C. was intended to be a duty, not the privilege it has become. I would absolutely vote for someone with that mindset. Politicians and diapers must be changed often, and for the same reason. Mark Twain. Story 14. Ooh, definitely. A little more left and a little more working class and care for the poor than the current Democratic Party. I would be thrilled. Story 15. I like voting third party anyway, so of course I would. The two-party system is fundamentally terrible and leads to prioritizing the least bad option rather than who is actually good and worthwhile. Story 16. The question has it backwards. If Americans truly wanted a third-party candidate to win, they would vote for one rather than be repeatedly misled by the misleading wasted vote argument designed to keep them confined. Story 17. If they had a real chance of winning and I agreed with their policies, there would be plenty of third-party candidates who do not succeed on their own merit. Story 18. Ironically, the only time Democrats and Republicans can get along is when they are working together to prevent any candidate who does not belong to one of those two parties, that is, a third party. Story 19. In 2016, I voted for the Libertarian candidate, Gary Johnson. I did not agree with much of what he said, but if a candidate gets more than 5% of the popular vote, they receive some federal funding. To my recollection, this would have been a quadrupling or quintupling of his funding. My hope was that this would push him to the general election debate stage. I did not think or hope he would win, but rather call out the Democratic and Republican candidates on issues that both parties ignore and force them to address them. Maybe get a few more independents in Congress. If it did not happen in 2016, I cannot see it happening anytime soon. I am a proud independent, but after January 6, 2021, there is no chance I will not vote down-ballot Democrat for the next several decades. Story 20. I vote third party regardless of the prospects of winning. Giving in to lesser of two evils arguments is what keeps the two-party system in power. In the last 3 presidential elections, I have voted for Chase Oliver, Joe Jorgensen, and Gary Johnson. The Libertarian Party is the only national party that truly believes in both limited government and individual liberty. We were the first party to advocate for marriage equality, which was included in the party's first platform in 1972. Story 21. I vote for third parties a lot, even though they do not have a chance of winning. My state always votes strongly Democratic, so I have the luxury of voting for the person I think is best because my vote will not affect the Republican or Democratic candidate. Story 22. Yes. The one who wanted to express human decency, kindness, and a desire to be friends with the rest of the world. Story 23. Third, he'll give me a 4th, 5th, and 23rd party candidate, and I will absolutely consider voting for anyone else besides the sham of a two-party system we currently have, where we just have an illusion of choice. Story 24. If people do not vote for them, they do not have a chance to win. If they do not have a chance to win, people do not vote for them. This is what the two main parties depend on to keep all the power for themselves. Third parties do not need to win to be effective for change. All they need to do is consistently take a small but significant number of votes away from one of the main parties, and that party will need to make changes to survive. Instead, people wait for one who has a chance to win and consider all other votes wasted. The wasted votes are the ones that keep the corrupt system in place. Story 25. Absolutely. I did not feel good about voting for either candidate. I still cannot believe that out of the entire country, our choice came down to these two. Really? Story 26. I think the problem is when I think of my ideal political party, it would have the goals of the Democratic Party but be more effective. Story 27. Yes, but it depends on the platform, the issues, and the candidate. I am not going to vote for a third party just for the sake of voting for a third party. Story 28. They will not even allow third parties to participate in the debates. Until there is parity, it will never happen. Story 29. I would vote for literally 75% of the other adults that I know personally over any candidate either major political party is likely to field anytime this century. Story 30. And which one? You mean which third-party candidate? Listen, if a third-party candidate ever had a real chance, it would have absolutely nothing to do with the party. It would be about who that person was. Story 31. Yes, and I think most people are. The problem is that being a third party does not tell us anything about their ideology except that it differs in some way from the two ideologies that we are all supposed to fit into. 340 million people, exactly two political ideologies, and each of those people is supposed to agree with most of what one of the two options says. The Republican Party and Democratic Party have made it next to impossible for a third-party candidate to win. Less competition for your party, right? Well, if you think about how the American government works, a third party would completely solve the Trump issue, as the Republicans would never have the votes needed to blatantly harm the entire population. Only someone aligned with Trump's political party would go along with this. The politicians do not want that, because then neither party can force through unpopular legislation to strengthen their political party. At least some seats would go to the third party, so this "we have a supermajority, just force through everything" mentality both parties have would no longer exist. Story 32. I am asking for a candidate who is not irrational. Otherwise, I am forced to vote for the lesser evil, which is very frustrating. Story 33. We should be required to vote for all candidates, assigning each a ranking from favorite to least favorite. The candidate who receives the most overall points wins. Story 34. It is a sad, disturbing, and very American question. It indicates that the two-party system is so ingrained in the voting psyche that only if a third party could win would they be worthy of voting for. No third party has that chance unless you vote for them anyway. If you do not, they will not win. To put the pressure on the third party to win in order to get your vote highlights the impossibility of it. Create a third party now and vote for them in every possible way. Story 35. Ranked choice voting failed as a ballot initiative in 5 of 6 states in the last election. It is safe to say the American people will not vote for a third party. Story 36. Of course, anyone with an ounce of reasoning ability should say the same. If, in addition to the chance of winning, they also represented my values in a way better than the Democratic Party. I am no Republican, but the Democratic Party has done themselves no favors lately with me. They used to be the party of progression and betterment. Now they are the blue version of the Republican Party. They have all just divided on the issues, and whatever one side says, the other says the opposite. Even if the opposite stance is mindless. Regardless of the specific issue at the time, that does not engender trust with me. It does not represent actual thought about the problem. It is just a knee-jerk response. Story 37. In the past, I would have supported a Green Party. However, they have become a problem at the national level. I would still support a Bernie Sanders party. Story 38. I would support candidates who are moderately left. I will not consider supporting anyone on the right until they start behaving sanely. I also will not support anyone far left because I think they live in a fantasy world of idealism. Center-left is where it is for me. A mix of progressive policies addressing the issues that plague us, government hands-off on social issues, but broadly supportive of everything that has made our country successful in the past. Pro-legal immigration, pro-worker visa. Separate religion from government as much as is feasibly and legally possible. Tighten government spending, but do it in an intelligent and well-planned manner. Avoid wholesale destruction of people's careers, as has been done in some cases. Spend money where it can have the biggest impact and use the scale of government to full effect. Drive down drug prices, spend on research that benefits humanity, and make it so no one will go bankrupt from medical costs. Actually solve the homelessness situation. Seriously look into it and come up with a plan that addresses it. Story 39. Absolutely, even get active. Voting for the less bad or bad that will reverse some worse bad is outdated. The extremes of both United States parties are utterly repugnant. And I do not mean the old-school pro-working class Democrats or cut-spending-to-the-bone Republicans either, though there are few of them left. Both parties attack anything that presents even a slight threat. Story 40. Yes, I would vote for myself. Or Bernie if he would stop some of the firearms rhetoric. As an Alaskan, my life and the lives of my family depended on having firearms. If I were in a city or if law enforcement was 3 hours away, it would be a different story. Common sense laws and policies would be nice to see. So yes, I would very much vote for a viable third-party candidate. Story 41. I do not vote based on the best chances of winning. I vote based on policy, the quality of plans to help people, and character. Story 42. The system is horribly broken. We need a deep cleaning. The existing parties need to go. Yes, I would vote to cause that change. Story 43. Samuel L. Jackson for president. Can you imagine him saying, "I said shut up motherfucker" to other politicians? That would be awesome. Story 44. Just about any third party. The two parties we have are both corrupt and enable each other. The two-party system is useless if both parties are inept or corrupt. Story 45. Yes. A progressive party built from the ground up. All that money poured into the propaganda against the existing parties can be wasted. Story 46. Our system does not support new parties or fractional parties. You would have to rewrite the entire Constitution of the United States and many states. If you keep to the United States framework, the key is to muzzle and limit big money. The loss of controls over that, due to unlimited political spending by anonymous donors, has severely downgraded the republic. Even the landscape before the Citizens United decision in that regard was not good. That being said, my years of working with the public and trying to get them to pay attention to relevant money and political issues, as their great-grandparents largely did, indicates that we are finished and can never be a proper republic again. Sorry to be a downer. Bad actors and dictators are trying to buy the law in all countries in all eras. They only succeed in a republic when voters fail decisively, and that is true in America for sure. If American voters were capable of running a proper republic, as they largely did at times in the past, we would be living in one today. We are not, and it is not getting better. Story 47. I am always baffled by the idea that people vote for someone they think has a chance or will win. Vote for the person who best supports your principles and sleep well that night. The only wasted vote is the one spent on someone you did not want to win. I have been voting since 1992, and only once did I vote for the person who ended up winning. Zero regrets. Story 48. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez Sanders. It is really that simple, and I do not know why every time I have brought it up, people say it is unrealistic. They are not the weak Democrats we have now. Story 49. One word. Libertarian. I haven't had anyone worth a darn since Gary Johnson. He wasn't all that great, but he was better. Story 50. The vast majority of Americans are not enthusiastic about either major political party. If given a viable third option, most would be open to voting for it. There are two types of people. First, those who waste their vote on a candidate who cannot win to express dissatisfaction with the system. And second, those who are reasonable and understand that they must choose between two options, selecting the one that best represents their values. The 2016 election is a good example. I voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary, but he did not secure the nomination. Therefore, I said, I don't really like her that much, but I prefer her over Donald Trump, so I will vote for Hillary Clinton in the general election. Some people lack a sense of pragmatism. Pragmatism is essential in politics. Idealism has its place, but adults must be able to choose the lesser of two evils. Story 51. Actually having a chance at winning is what stops the majority of potential voters from voting third party. Story 52. Yes, and it has happened before. In 2016, Bernie Sanders was running against Hillary Clinton for the Democratic Party. He won, but the Democratic National Committee, the party's head political convention, chose Hillary anyway. There were lawsuits that showed he won. The committee's response was, "We are a private company that can pick and choose our candidates." The courts agreed. This proves that even though we voted, our votes did not matter. So, Trump won against Hillary because Democratic hubris is astounding. I developed a strong dislike for the Democrats for making my vote worthless, and now I fully support Trump and the Republicans. Judge me if you want. Story 53. If it were possible for a third-party presidential candidate to win, which it is not, then yes, I would. Until then, I will continue to vote for the least worst candidate. Story 54. I was done with voting when they tanked Gary Johnson because of the Aleppo question. We had the classic South Park turd sandwich or giant douche election, and even then they did not go for the third-party candidate. Meanwhile, Google's top search after the interview was also, "What is Aleppo?" Story 55. I have no hope since lobbying is illegal in other countries but not in ours. They would just ruin it. It is not about the parties. It is about the laws. Story 56. I would like to see the right abandon the far right and the left abandon the far left to form a new party called the middle. They would get my vote. Story 57. I have been voting for third-party candidates in multiple election cycles. The Libertarian Party is not perfect, but it aligns closest with most of my beliefs, so that is who I would like to see in power. Story 58. Third-party voting will always be a waste of a vote in first-past-the-post voting elections. Advocate for ranked choice voting variants. Story 59. Vermin Supreme supports free ponies and dental care. He will take away our guns and give us better ones. Like all other politicians, he will not keep his promises if elected. Story 60. Maybe, but not libertarian. I am a constitutionalist. As long as the law or action does not violate the Constitution, I will accept it. I may not like it, but I will accept it. Story 61. Third parties have historically hurt the candidate they mostly agree with, allowing the candidate they mostly disagree with to win. People who want a third-party candidate are too stubborn to admit their political views are unpopular with the majority of Americans. With over 300 million people in the United States, you have to be willing to compromise on some things. Story 62. The last person who had a remote chance to win was Ross Perot. He was intelligent and not just a television personality. However, Americans voted for someone else. The next president will be Mama June from the Honey Boo Boo television show. She will be the first female Republican president. You heard it here first. Story 63. Under our current system, if they have a chance of winning, they would not be considered third party. Story 64. Historically, the answer is someone in the middle of the road. Ross Perot received 18% of the vote despite dropping out of the election 6 months before November. Story 65. If it looked like the third party had a real chance of winning, and that third party seemed to match on policy, then yes, that candidate could receive a vote. Story 66. To the first question, absolutely, I would 100% be willing to vote for a third-party candidate with a chance of winning. To the second question, it is not possible to answer this until we have an actual third party. All we have right now are a handful of personal vanity projects that appear every 4 years before going back into hibernation. Story 67. Nothing will fix the American system of governing except a complete collapse and rebuild. I have watched piece by piece over the past 70 years as corruption and criminal activities have become normalized to the point that the judicial system is also corrupted. Elections are being rigged frequently now. This has been happening since the 2000s. Ballot boxes and bags are the easiest to manipulate. Switching out a bag or box with a set of fixed ballots ends the process. Florida has had this problem for decades. It has gotten so bad that when people find a ballot box in a lake or canal, they do not bother reporting it because nothing will be done. Story 68. I have already been doing it for the last 4 elections. I have voted for the Libertarian Party candidate. I agree with their policy stances the most. I do not agree with all of them, but much more than the 2 major parties we have been stuck with. Story 69. I do not care about political parties. I dislike the Democratic Party as much as I dislike the Republican Party. I vote for the best candidate. Story 70. Americans, are you ready to vote for a third-party candidate because the establishment candidates never bothered to actually try to earn your vote? Story 71. The problem here is not only limited options but also people voting based on color or party line. It is unreasonable to vote based on affiliation instead of policies and principles. Story 72. I have been voting exclusively for third-party candidates for 25 years. There is nothing to be gained from voting for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Story 73. It depends on the third-party candidate and their positions on the issues. The United States desperately needs a normal political party that holds middle positions rather than extremes of right or left. The establishment elite of both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have nothing in common with the average American. They have not shopped for their own groceries, struggled to find child care, driven their own cars, or worried about ever being able to afford to buy a home in decades. They are all totally out of touch. We need normal people to be running the United States government, not these clueless 1% Ivy League elitists. Having attended any elite university should automatically disqualify one from running for public office. Story 74. Anybody who says yes is voting for the party they do not like. In a 2-party system, this is what we get. Both the left and the right actively fund third-party candidates to help ensure the left or the right get what they want. The only option is to change the way elections are held, such as in Maine. Story 75. We need no party candidates and only no party candidates. Party affiliation should disqualify a person from holding any office of public trust. Story 76. The moral of the story. If the number of people who wish for change more than winning or fearing negative association with the bad guy voted for any party other than the 2 major parties, this country might actually see real change. However, they have been told so often and so confidently that there is no hope and no use that they believe they are not the majority. I believe they would actually be a supermajority. Story 77. Absolutely. I want someone who will advance liberal and progressive policies without being spineless. I do not see that in the Democratic Party, and I would sooner vote for a chimpanzee than a member of the Republican Party. The Republican Party has engineered a steep decline in American power, undermined American leadership globally, and is determined to install a Christian theocratic, plutocratic, techno-feudalist autocracy at home. Story 78. There have been third-party candidates in the United States presidential elections in my lifetime. I would vote for a third-party candidate regardless of their chances if I believed in their platform. Story 79. I always vote for a third party for president and often for the Senate. I have not lived in a state where my vote mattered for a long time. I might as well vote for the candidate who is closest to my views. Story 80. Yes, I usually vote for third-party candidates anyway. The worst part is that the news media does not want you to know who else is running besides the 2 main candidates, so the word does not get out and people cannot vote for them in the first place. Ross Perot had to use a lot of his own money to make himself heard initially. The same goes for Jesse Ventura. Once they got attention, they moved on from there. Story 81. This country celebrates diversity in all things: religion, ethnicity, race, sexuality, gender, and more. However, you need to choose one of the 2 major political parties. Everything outside of these 2 is not considered viable. Both parties represent 2 sides of the same flawed coin. I believe term limits are more important than who the president is. At this point, we should nominate 100 people and randomly select a name rather than continue with the current problematic system. Story 82. Absolutely. I will never vote for a non-centrist Republican again, and I have serious reservations about voting for another Democrat. We wasted 4 years under President Biden, and it cost us the 2024 election, as well as the 2016 election because the Democratic National Committee refused to support Bernie Sanders. I also refuse to vote for another older white man. I will be 60 soon, and if the candidate is older than me, I will not vote for them. The Democratic Party needs new and younger members who can energize the party and focus on the future instead of living in the past. Story 83. If the reason the third-party candidate had a chance was that the United States had finally implemented ranked choice voting and proportional representation, I would be thrilled to vote for whichever party and candidate had the right mix of competence and ideological acceptability. If it is still the first-past-the-post system we have now, then I am going to vote for the strongest non-Republican candidate no matter what. I will not be happy to do so, but it will be better if they win than what we have now. Story 84. I will only vote third party now. Joe Biden let Donald Trump happen. He knew how bad Donald Trump would be and that he had presidential immunity. Now we are stuck with Donald Trump tearing this country down. Also, the Democrats undermined Bernie Sanders' run for president every time. Story 85. It depends on the policies the candidate supports, but if the policies are good and they have a chance, then sure. Story 86. There are libertarians who are the party of I've got mine, so forget you. Then there is the Green Party who have very few thoughtful ideas and believe in misguided policies. The Nazi Party exists, but no one except a Nazi wants them. Most of the alternate parties are either unwise or harmful. There are not many good alternatives. At this point, I would support an unaffiliated, independent candidate running solely on their political stances on the main issues that always come up. Show me one of those with a real chance of winning, and you can have my vote. Story 87. Anyone who is not going to defund everything our taxes support. Someone who would not create a meme coin to illegally accept bribes. Someone who would not take $400 million jets. Someone who would make it illegal for any government official to trade stocks. Someone we can be proud to have representing our country. Someone who understands the economy and makes the right decisions for the people, not for billionaires. Someone who does not turn the Department of Homeland Security against citizens. Someone who does not insult opposing people. Someone who does not take away holidays for veterans. Someone who loves the people of the country and does not call them idiots. Someone who represents the people and is a voice for the people. Story 88. More choices would be fine, but can we just get term limits and remove billionaires from our elections? Story 89. I have been voting for third-party candidates for years. We need more choices, not the same poor options we are given every time. Story 90. I don't even care. Absolutely any other random grouping of people should be given a chance, and I would like to see what happens. Can't be worse or as ineffectual. Try a group of dogs and one cat. Just see. Story 91. There are currently 0 third-party candidates I would vote for. Do not get me wrong, I am hoping there will be one. But they will have to be able to compete on the national level or I will not waste my time. They need to be polling to pull at least 30% of the vote in a 3-party race for me to even consider it. If a charismatic, personal problem-free candidate ran on a platform that focuses on quality of life for all and opposes the wealthy, they would win. I feel like I am waiting for the Messiah at this point. There is not a lot of hope for me. Story 92. I have already voted for a third party in the past. It does not make sense to vote Republican or Democrat if they cannot provide competent candidates. People do not vote for a third party because they believe it is a waste of a vote, but this is a self-fulfilling prophecy that traps us into tolerating incompetence. Story 93. Sure, I would be willing to vote third party. Do you know who would not? The Electoral College, the group of electors who actually decide who becomes president. In many states, they are legally required to vote according to the plurality of the state's voters. However, they may not comply. They might become faithless electors, vote for the 2 major parties, and if they face any legal consequences, they could receive a pardon from the president. There is no third-party pathway in the United States. The only hope is a hostile takeover. Story 94. Democratic Republicans 2028. Christ, please, but with some socialism added for good measure. Bring back actual liberalism, separation of church and state, and the socialist view that we are all brothers fighting against capitalism. Yes, 2028. Story 95. I am in my 60s and have never voted for a Republican or Democrat. I usually vote Libertarian. Is it a waste of my vote? I disagree. Cannot be worse than what we have been getting. Story 96. At this point, I am not interested in what the party is, just what the candidate stands for. I do not want your promises. I want to know how you will do it. Is it realistic, or is it perfect circumstances that you will never get? Do you abide by the Constitution and place importance on personal freedom? Do you think healthcare is a human right, considering we live in the richest country in the world? I will vote for president for the next one who convinces me they are not a lizard person and actually cares about the American people and does not rely on partisanship to get their votes. President does not lead one party. They lead us all. I want a president who speaks to all. Story 97. Almost certainly. Whoever Ralph Nader's spiritual successor is, currently it is none of the well-known individuals. Story 98. You will never get a viable third-party candidate with first past the post. It is a mathematical certainty. We have known this for decades, if not centuries. If you want better representation, then change the system. Story 99. 10 billion% yes. I would vote for most any of them since they are not yet controlled by corporate interests like the Democratic and Republican parties are. Story 100. Absolutely yes, I would, which is exactly why the authorities are never going to allow it to happen. The Democrats are in absolute freefall with no viable candidates, and the Republican Party is thoroughly corrupt and rotten to their very core. Story 101. If you understand the Electoral College, you understand that a third party has no chance. They can never get a plurality of the votes, and then it is up to Congress to decide. The fix is in. Anytime a valid outsider gets close, the media sabotages them. See Ron Paul. Story 102. My wife and I are both big supporters of Bernie Sanders. We would definitely have voted for him if he had made it to the general election in 2016, 2020, or 2024. Story 103. I am a registered independent. I do not vote based on political party. I vote for the person who is closest aligned with how I feel about the issues. Story 104. Honestly, I am shocked we have not had one yet. People say they hate both political parties, but clearly, they really hate one party more because they continue to settle for their preferred party rather than risk allowing the other side to win. Story 105. My party is anti-incumbent. It does not matter who it is or what office. It is the only thing in politics I can vote for and not feel like I am only picking the lesser of two evils. I know it is semantics. Regardless, yes, I would totally vote for a third-party candidate as long as they are not an incumbent. Story 106. I have voted for every Libertarian Party presidential candidate since 1980, except for the last election when I wrote myself in because all the other choices were poor. Yes, I actively seek third-party candidates and support alternative voting systems. Story 107. I will only use third-party services at this point. There is no reason to keep doing the same thing. This is the definition of stupidity. Story 108. Either for an independent or libertarian, which direction I go politically really depends on the issue. Story 109. I have already voted for a third-party candidate many times. You can do this as well. Every candidate has an equal chance of winning. The problem is that most people are so worried about picking the losing candidate that they do not think beyond that. It is simply unwise to believe the only reason to vote is to pick the winner. That is called gambling. Story 110. Most definitely. I have been hoping for more independent and third-party candidates to run in all federal elections for a long time now. Story 111. I dislike the American mentality of, I am not going to vote for them. They have no chance to win, and you are wasting your vote. This mindset is the reason we choose between the least qualified candidates every 4 years. The only way to end the two-party system, short of a large uprising, is to vote for a third party. Story 112. Yes, but I can't see that happening anytime soon. Right now, it's a wasted vote or a virtue signaling vote. You vote for a candidate who has no chance of winning, Then when whomever wins, you can say, well, I didn't vote for that. I think the only way out of this is to do away with political parties. Maybe then we'd have a shot. The candidates wouldn't have to go as far to the extremes to win the primary. As it is now, we always have two extremes to choose from in the general election. If we did away with political parties, it seems to me that the candidates would have to go to the center to win. Then we'd be more likely to have a choice between a center-left and center-right candidate. I'm not exactly sure how we would implement it. How would the primaries work? Would it simply be the top two candidates moving to the general? I don't know, but the two-party system needs to go. Story 113 with the current third parties, definitely not. Actually, look into the Greens and the Libertarians and the candidates they run. They are bigger narcissists than the two main candidates at the top of the ticket every time, often with just bad policy positions. Story 114. I would, but I prefer solid outsiders within the Democratic and Republican parties to win their nominations. If you want viable multiple parties, you will have to end the Electoral College and go straight to the popular vote. That would hurt the Democratic Party more than the Republican Party, as candidates like Bernie Sanders could viably run their own candidacies. Story 115. If the third party truly represented democratic socialism, I would vote for them for sure. If it is just another corporate party, then I will stick with the devil I know, the Democratic Party. Story 116. If they were similar to a social democrat with a strong humanitarian track record, I would support their campaign with any organs I do not need. Story 117. I voted for a third party in this election regardless. They will never have the chance if you do not vote for them. I received a lot of criticism for doing that from Reddit users. Apparently, it is my fault that the Orange Man won, all because I voted third party. Story 118. It also matters whether they can get things done and what they want accomplished. We do not need another president who harms the country. These factors determine whether we should vote for them. Story 119. It makes me wonder why we even have political parties. Why don't we have candidates running based on their policies instead of their party affiliation? Story 120. Make it the Purple Party. The party that respects all individual United States citizens, upholds the Constitution, and will not allow any government workers making more than $100,000 a year to have any involvement in the stock market or trades. Story 121. I would be willing to vote for a third party. As for which one, how am I supposed to answer that? None of the parties in the United States has anyone I like. If they did, I would have voted for them instead of Kamala Harris. Story 122. Answer: yes. Practical answer: third parties need to show up and win in local elections to have a chance. I would vote third party for town council or sheriff just to prove they have something going if I could. Where I live, it rarely happens, and those candidates have no political machine behind them to get out the vote. A presidential candidate from a party nobody has heard of has no chance, nor should they if there is no collective understanding of what their party stands for. Story 123. A third-party candidate does not have a chance. The country is divided between left and right. The House of Representatives, the Senate, the Oval Office, the Supreme Court, and all of the money that flows through them are comfortably entrenched, especially among voters. Voters are disengaged and have voted left or right for generations. A third-party candidate would be extremely lucky and exceptionally skilled to receive 20% of the vote. Story 124. We need ranked choice voting. Without that, third parties are not likely to overcome the two-party system. With it, they could really be a force to be reckoned with. Story 125. Donald Trump proved that a third-party candidate is effectively impossible. If they were popular enough to win, they would most likely receive a nomination from the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Story 126. Winning the election without the support of one major party would be entirely Pyrrhic. You would have no allies to enact your agenda. I do think we could create a viable third party of centrists by appealing to the remaining reasonable Republicans and consensus-oriented Democrats, but that would require a level of bravery that does not exist in our politics right now. As others have noted, we need to build a ranked choice voting system for presidential elections. That would instantly create a multi-party system, as candidates would have to assemble a coalition across multiple groups to win a clear majority. You do not even need to change the Electoral College, as the states could be compelled to confirm the candidate with a plurality. Story 127. Even though the third party aligns best with my personal values, voting third party is throwing your vote away. I know both candidates do not reflect the majority of Americans' values, but now is not the time for a protest vote. Both these parties are bad. I lose no matter what. I am not even going to bother. These are the thoughts of approximately 150 million eligible American voters every election. Story 128. The left and right have been two sides of the same coin for decades. They do not truly hate each other as they outwardly project, because they have a monopoly on politics. Everyone always has to choose between them, so no matter who wins, the people end up suffering while they act in their own interests. Standard divide and conquer. A legitimate third-party option would be greatly welcomed. The biggest problem right now is that any realistic third candidate gets priced out of the race because the super political action committees make it nearly impossible for people to keep up financially without compromising their values to corporate interests. Story 129. Technically, any third party has a chance if it has enough people to support it. At this point, third parties tend to take votes from the Democratic Party, which allows the Republican Party to win. It is usually Democratic Party voters who get fed up with the two-party system and either support a third party or abstain from voting, while Republican Party voters, no matter how bad the candidate, always show up to vote. To have meaningful third parties, there would probably need to be four parties. One that appeals to more progressive members of the Democratic Party and one that takes a significant number of votes from the Republican Party. Story 130. Yes, absolutely. Tired of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party collectively ruining the country to troll the other party. It is time to get rid of the two-party system. Our country was not designed for it. Story 131. Yes, Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont. A man of conviction who has always been on the right side of history and has always stood up to power. He will get my vote every time he is on the ballot. Every single time. Story 132. I have voted often for third-party candidates when I think the candidate is a better choice than the main party candidates. Story 133. I voted for a third party in the last two elections. I could not bring myself to vote for either main candidate, but I hold to the idea that if you do not vote, you do not have the right to complain about what is going on. Story 134. Yes, of course. Even if I did not agree with their ambitions, I would vote for anything to reduce the bipartisan polarization at this point. I believe putting someone in power who is not exclusively a Democrat or Republican would be beneficial because they could influence people and steer decisions in a way that does not always solely benefit one of the major parties' motives. Story 135. What a foolish question. No third-party candidate will ever have a chance of winning unless they receive votes. So you are only considering lesser evil voters or bandwagoners, which is not how this works. You should be asking which parties should have more support than they actually receive. That will tell you where people's hearts lie outside of the actual election system challenges. Story 136. It's tough to trust someone who has never worked in politics before because you have to take them at their word without any proven track record. However, voting for someone who has already been through the challenges of our political process means they have compromised too much and have not done enough to change our current situation. Could an existing politician run as a third-party candidate? If there were a great option, we would already know who they are. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.